Yeah, so Carrie asked me to come up with some examples of where AI is working or where it's not working, and I've been thinking of my own experiences, but also asking friends and neighbors. So I'm just going to give you hopefully a quick sampling of some illustrative cases that will hopefully prompt some discussion and other examples from the audience. Next. So this is one from relatively early where, I was filling out one of these dreaded T32, I guess like a progress report or a submission, where they ask you like to document the current role and history and funding history of every one of your past trainees, which becomes like a pretty massive task over time. And I found it really useful actually to, be able to like request, say, like the CV from my trainees and then have it convert from something like this format you're seeing here that they might have listed in their CV to something like the next slide, where it's in like a very specific format that the grant or the progress report is requesting. So kind of rather than spending my time doing this menial task of reformatting the text, AI is actually quite good at those kinds of tasks. You should definitely, always be aware of what you're putting into AI. So we had built a machine learning model that predicts the responses from our immunotherapy tumor board. And we had built the model in R, but we wanted to integrate it into a larger Python package. And so we use Copilot. So what she's showing here, I'm sorry, it's a little small, but on the left is an existing R script. And on the right, she's simply asking, like, can you turn this RMD file into a Python script for me? And Copilot is dutifully basically converting the R code into a fully formed Python script. And when it gets to the end, she's going to have the opportunity to save that script. It kind of explains what it did and how to use it. And she's just going to save it for later. So of course, this is useful, but does it work? Is it correct? You have to very carefully vet these things. But we were kind of amazed at how, she'd actually never written any Python before. Like she was strong in R, but had almost no Python experience. And with relatively very minor modifications, the Python version was almost completely correct. And we were able to evaluate that because we had the working R version. We had all of these evaluations against, internal cross-validation, external test sets. And we just like systematically went through every aspect of the model and its performance and showed that the new Python version was performing very similarly. So here you can see the performance on the test set was highly concordant. On the next slide, you can see the two models come with almost identical, slightly shifted variable importance ranking. You can see even the confusion matrix is quite similar. There were a few samples that shifted from one to the other class, but for the most part, they were highly, highly concordant. And actually, the Python model we found is performing slightly better. So that was a really successful example of where someone's both kind of taking their R knowledge and then quickly ramping up on how to do the sort of same thing in Python, and then just practically turning it into a piece of Python code that we could better integrate into an existing pipeline. I think the lesson here is that code generation can actually work quite well, particularly if you have an existing implementation to benchmark against and results that you can benchmark against. Another example, Carrie already alluded to this, creating acronyms. This is a real example where we had done a very large kind of atlas of single cell analysis on diffuse large B-cell lymphomas, and we'd identified these different lymphoma microenvironments that we think have different clinical relevances. And I just kind of described that situation to the AI and asked it if it could come up with a catchy name or acronym for the system. And actually the first one in the list ended up being the one that we liked, and we went with it. And that is now like in the title or abstract of the paper that has been accepted at Cancer Cell. And we're using it very widely. So that's a nice example of getting an acronym quickly. You can use it to learn just how to use like a piece of software. So in this case, I was using the Loop browser, if you're familiar with that. It's a GUI for very nicely interacting with single cell data. And I wanted to upload a specific set of cell barcodes so I could like limit my view or identify where certain cells in the UMAP were. And I could not remember how to do that. And so I asked ChatGPT, how do you import a defined list of barcodes to visualize in the Loop browser? And it gave me these instructions, and it said, like, go to the categories panel But for the life of me, I could not find the categories panel. So on the next slide, you can see me saying, like, I'm looking at the loop browser, and I told it the version, and I said, I can't find the categories panel. And it said, oh, that's because as of v7, and therefore your version, this has been moved into the clusters mode. And then it gave me the updated instructions, and including telling you need to go to this one view and find this little upload button next to the words create a new group, which is very unintuitive, actually, in my opinion. But it really helped me find this like kind of hidden button that now serves the function that I was previously aware of for uploading some barcodes to the loop browser. This is another example from Katie. So we were recently doing a workshop for the RI together, and she wanted a single image that would convey a graduate student in XKCD style with a mop kind of cleaning up their R scripts. And this is the first result she got back, and she liked it. And so this was like in her slide deck, instantly. So it can be really good for kind of cheap thrills like that, like quick graphics cartoons. Here's a little bit more complicated example where I created a figure from scratch for a review article we were working on. So we were actually writing a paper about AI and looking forward to what AI in medicine might involve. I gave it a prompt. I kind of gave it the backstory of what we're trying to do, and it created this figure for me. And this was the first image I ever saw in DALL-E at the time, and it was pretty cool, but it wasn't really what I wanted. I want something more conceptual. So I said, give me something more conceptual, and it gave me something very conceptual. I thought this was cool, but it's not really what I want. I didn't like the word hype. I thought, like, why is this person on the right like seemingly being like surgically dissected down the middle? So I gave it some further instruction, and on the next slide you can see that it gave me something completely different. So it really jumps around a lot, right? But I did like the evolution aspect of this and how it seemed to be showing like this evolution from simpler to more complex AI eras. So I kind of asked it to go down that avenue more. It gave me something that was closer to what I was imagining, showing this evolution from rule-based to machine learning to deep learning to generative AI, but it doesn't have the detail right. So I said, okay, this is cool, but give me these 4 categories and spelled correctly, please. This is the beginning of a long argument about how words should be spelled. And you can see it kind of made like something that's really close to what I ended up with. It had kind of like 4 depictions of these different eras. Still, most of the words are messed up. So I went through a lot more prompts and then eventually got to this, which is, I thought, like really close to what I was going for, but it still had a lot of these like idiosyncratic errors. And then that's when I discovered the select and edit function. So this is really useful if you're creating images with DALL-E or ChatGPT, that you can basically highlight something and say, replace this with that. And so I did a lot of that. And then you can see the final product, which is what ended up being included in this review article. But it took a lot of prompts. So I think on the next slide, the lesson is that sometimes you need a really extended conversation. It took me like probably a couple of hours to make that figure. It's probably a lot less still than the infinite amount of time it would take me to create it the old-fashioned way, because I simply have no graphical artist skills like that at all. But it's not trivially 5 minutes either. It's still work. So these are just some more examples. Some of them are silly, some of them are real. Figuring out how to extract specific details of documentation from scikit-learn, asking it about giving me a better or a new figure caption, asking how to explain things to my kindergartner, how do I do a specific kind of grepping, how do I configure Apache for HTTPS. I think the point of this is that the previous examples I gave are neither comprehensive nor representative of the broad array of things that you can get fairly satisfying answers from ChatGPT or similar AIs. So I use it a lot, as you can see. This is, like 1% of my queries. So are there particularly useful things people have experienced that they would like to share?